festively decked out today. So, Room with the Broom. It's kind of a little bit of a risk to go out there and say, okay, I'm going to take this children's story and try to build a sermon about it, so you're going to have to hang with me a little bit. But there's a lot of things I liked about this story. I hadn't heard of it before. It's apparently pretty popular with the younger kids, and the author has done a couple of stories that Christina Leon Tracy, the senior minister up at Appleton, who has very little kids, clued me in on this. So the book has this obviously classic Halloween image, a witch, a cat, and a cauldron. But it has a few twists. So if you want to flip to the next slide, Sylvia, please. So this, the lead-in slide here, the cat isn't black. It's an orange tiger cat with kind of a silly grin on its face. So it doesn't look very threatening like that old black cat is supposed to be. And the witch doesn't seem very evil to me. She's got a polka dot bow on the end of her orange braided hair, for heaven's sakes. It's not that wild black or gray hair that you stereotypically see for Halloween. And then if you look very closely, it's probably not so clear on this slide, she's got one of those nice little jeweled brooches to hold her cape on instead of some spider web thing or skull or something like up on my hat here. Now the witch doesn't seem to be the image of perfection either. She's not that goodness and glamour like Glenda the Good Witch from The Wizard of Oz, who, if you know this movie probably, all in white, all in jewels, floats around in a bubble and speaks with this really cheerful voice. So this witch is neither good nor evil. I'd say this witch is probably very human in this story. And then unfortunately, bad stuff, unfortunate stuff just keeps happening to her. So think about it. First, her hat flies off. Okay, now, come on. A lot of you have probably seen the Harry Potter stuff. You have to have a hat to be a witch. How can you not have your hat? So it flies off, and the dog finds it. And then out of gratefulness, when the dog asks if there's room for him, she says, of course, we'll make room on the broom. Well, then the next thing, her bow flies off, and a bird finds it, and they make room on the broom for the cat. Now this witch is kind of a klutz. She drops her wand. Again, in Harry Potter stuff, if you don't have your wand, you're not doing very well. How are you going to battle, the next battle that's coming up? So she drops her wand. This is getting a little bit more serious. And the frog finds it, and then they make room on the broom. And then fourth, what we're told is that her accommodating and generous nature gets the best of her, and her broom breaks in half. Okay, in my order of magnitude, that would be catastrophic failure. I don't know how brooms work. I thought it had something to do with the broom part in the back. But if you remember, she goes flying on just on the front stick of it. So somehow that works. But all of her friends fall to the earth, so that's a problem. That's a failure. And then she flies into this cloud of dragon steam, and she's got a big problem. Okay? So if the story ended there, what would be the moral of the story? It'd be our generosity has its limits. Don't promise the moon when you can't deliver, I guess, or the whole broom when you can't hold it up. And it probably would mean that we need to be much more prudent and stop before we go too far. But the story goes on. Yeah. Her new friends collaborate and then find a way to overcome the scary dragon. So then the moral is the community means strength, the same thing that the Starhawk reading was. Well, then there's even more to the story. The witch asks for contributions from her friends. So something that's unique to them as individuals. And then with the help of magic, she comes up with this very creative solution to accommodate everyone. They hop on this new broom with its deluxe accommodations that even includes a nest and a swimming pool, and they fly away home. 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 Home is where your friends are. Home is where your peeps are. The story never talks about that you're flying off to a destination like the Promised Land, a new home. It's all about who's on the broom with her. Home is your community. So I want to reread the Starhawk reading again with that in mind. We are all longing to go home to some place where we have never been, a place half remembered, half envisioned. We can only catch a glimpse of from time to time. Community. Somewhere there are people to whom we can speak with passion without having to have the words catch in our throat. You don't have to be guarded amongst these people. Somewhere a circle of hands will open to receive us, eyes will light up as we enter, and voices will celebrate with us whenever we have come into our own power, whenever we can be our authentic selves. These people will embrace us. Community means strength that joins our strength to do the work then that needs to be done. How do you go out in the world? Arms to hold us when we falter, a circle of healing, a circle of friends. Some place where we can be free. A place where we are free to feel at home. Well, I was originally drawn to the song Fly Away Home because of its title. It was actually suggested to me by the music director up at the Fellowship in Appleton. And when I played the recording, I'm like, oh, perfect, I've got to use this because of the flyaway theme and the close association with the book. Now, maybe some of you had known this song before. I kind of live my life a little bit under a rock when it comes to pop culture. So I researched it a bit, and I discovered that it's often used by high school choirs for graduation ceremonies. The idea of flying off to begin the next chapter of life, but you always have that connection to a home, to your friends, to your people. But what really grabbed me were the images of this particular video. There are more than one video for this song. The images appear to be mostly of women, and women that are very connected to each other in typically only women can. Women connected to a deeper spirit. And the image that I most cherish is this one, if you want to play the next one. This image. So it reminded me of the spirit world. I've seen a lot of movies that have similar images where you're in a woods and there's either different fires, in this case it's fires up in lanterns, and the woman is dressed very eloquently, almost like there's some sort of ritual that's about to happen. I was really caught by this this theme that I saw here. And it made me stop and think about the book again, believe it or not, just by some of the images in this video, to re-look at the book from a theological perspective. Okay, you thought you were going to have a kid's book today, but I went on to a theological perspective. The witch represents a common human, the human experience, all of us going through life. And community is built through mutual aid and support. That's kind of obvious. There's clearly sort of this acceptance of all in it. You've got a cat, a dog, a bird, a frog, a lot of creatures that aren't necessarily the first things you'd think of to have on a broom flying through the air. And they come together in strength to face adversity. And then there's really this, you know, it's treated as magic in the book, but it's really creative problem solving. But all of this, in this children's story, all of this human creativity community is done through a mystical, magical, imaginative narrative. And to me, it dawned on me that it's a theology of mystical religious humanism. I know, I'm throwing more terms out at you. But it's often described, in my opinion, in Unitarian Universalist congregations that I've been in. It's often described in the way people feel about the congregation and the way they think of their theology, but it's often not named, and this is my name. But I think it's a common theology these days in Unitarian Universalism, mystical religious humanism. So let me kind of unpack that a bit. It's a lot of funky, heady names, right? Humanism. I think most of us probably have some kind of an idea of what humanism is. It's been around since the Greeks, as far as I know, but it became very prominent in the culture, at least in the United States and Europe, in the end of the 19th century, entering into the 20th century. Our culture had gone through a lot of evolution through the Reformation, through Darwin and the discovery of evolution, and a lot of the scientific method. So people were questioning that, can I just take, for example, in our society, Christianity is the dominant theology, can I take it just as its word as it is, or is it something that needs to be questioned and thought about and picked apart? And that doesn't mean it's not a valid faith, but I don't need to take it at face value. And so humanism eventually grew out of that with the idea that human beings are capable of evolving to something greater than they currently are, and we don't require an outside supernatural being or entity or something else, superpowers, to come and cause that to happen. So it kind of reached a crescendo in the early 30s with the writing of the Humanist Manifesto, and signed by a bunch of folks in Chicago. And basically it's a human rights kind of document. It says everybody is created equal, everybody on the earth should be entitled to having full employment. Basically every human being should be able to come into who they were meant to be, full empowerment. So she should take care of poverty and all the things on the earth, and no one should have to fear for their lives. It eventually evolved into something, and we need to interact with the rest of the planet, and so come into human beings living in a world of harmony and sustainability. So that's the humanism part of it. Religious humanism, you've heard me talk about that before and use that term, is often something that I see in Unitarian Universalist congregations. It's a very common term. What that means is, you believe in a lot of the humanist ideals. If you look at our 7 principles, they are humanist ideals. That's where they came from. But we do it in community. Instead of being, you've heard of secular humanism versus religious humanism. Secular humanism tends to be more individualistic, maybe in social groups and forums, and you're talking about issues and you're acting on issues, but it doesn't have that religious nature to it. So it's what we do here every Sunday. We gather in community, we have rites of passage and ritual, we speak more about love and compassion and affection rather than let's go get this program done to make this change. And then you come here to regularly be reinforced in affirmation and renewal so that you can go out in the world and do the work that needs to get done. That's more or less my definition of religious humanism. And then you get into mystical religious humanism. So mystical, this is where it gets a little tricky and maybe a little uncomfortable for those of us that lean a little bit more to the rational, scientific in nature. And the way I think of it is basically an acceptance of metaphor. That everything has a metaphor, and human beings need metaphor to be able to understand their place in the world, to understand how we make sense of our world. And it's okay if I accept all kinds of metaphor with the understanding that your metaphor and my metaphor don't have to be the same to be meaningful. So let me go into a little bit more about that. Think about supernatural, I put that in quotes, supernatural connections. Nature. This congregation is very nature-based, right? And I often hear people talk about, I was in the mountains, I was next to the stream, I was in the woods, I was at the oceans, I was looking at the night sky and all of the stars. Or frankly, I've been out in the prairie lately and just watching miles and miles of grass blowing in the wind. And you can't help but be moved. Now, some people would see that. I have a friend who would see that as the hand of God giving her the gift of that beautiful day. To me, it doesn't matter whether it's God or not, or just nature. God is a metaphor. The Gaia, if I want to believe in the earth as a living entity, is a metaphor. It's all metaphor, and I can feel very moved in a supernatural way just by looking at those kinds of things. Another one for me is ancestors. This is particularly poignant in African religion. They're very connected in with ancestors and try to have ancestors part of their daily lives and have conversations with them constantly about, I've got this tough decision, or talk about their woes and their sorrows and that kind of thing. And I have a bit of that. I think I've told you before, if you came to my house in Appleton, it would look like an eclectic garage sale. Because on my wife's side and my side, we have a lot of furniture from our ancestors. Some of it was handmade. I have 5 sets of dishes because these dishes belong to somebody. And so on a certain day, I'll remember Aunt Evie will get out her green dishes and remember her. So to me, I feel very comfortable in an environment where these physical, tangible things are around me, and I feel like they're with me. Now, in my head, no, they're not, but that doesn't matter. It's the feeling that I get. One thing is in singing. My mother and my aunt were in church choirs and sopranos, big singers, right? And so I have this image that back to the 1600s, because I know my lineage back that far, that there's always been somebody in the church choir back in Germany that descends down to me. And some of you have been to some of my concerts, and sometimes I feel like I have this out-of-body experience, and I can feel them with me, kind of singing there with me. Now, no, they're probably not really there, and that'd be kind of spooky if they popped up in the concert. But it's that kind of mysticism that I think is perfectly compatible with my humanism. Then there's others. People talk about the images of galaxies and the expanse of time. Senses, smells, images, tastes, feelings, intuition, that kind of thing. I'll give you one more example that's very near and dear to me. I don't know if I've ever brought this here before.
No.
But when I was ordained, this was a gift from someone from the United Tribe who belonged to the congregation in Appleton. And it's actually a carved eagle feather, I don't know if you can see it really well back there, out of a buffalo bone. And to me, it's so sacred, partly because of the images of what it was carved out of, what it is carved to be, and the person who gave it to me is very spiritual. And so I feel like it's almost my magic wand. I feel like it's got a lot of power. Now, intellectually, I know it doesn't, but that doesn't matter. And to me, it's very compatible with my belief. And that's what I'm trying to say. There's all these metaphors, but we can all have our own individual one and make room for everybody in this faith. World religions is probably the example that I see the most. And so I kind of wanted to say why I'm wearing this stole. I kind of have all kinds of different symbols here. The sky, the whole rainbow, a little bit more of the cosmos and the evolution kind of thing. This stole, to me, it's a representation of the room for everybody, room for all kinds of different faiths. And in world religions, we have nature-based, which I kind of talked about a little bit before, monotheistic, so Islam, Christianity, Judaism. It has more to do with a personal relationship with a God and very much rules about how to live a righteous life. Polytheists, especially in Hinduism, where you kind of can make your own, pick and choose out of the 10,000 gods, a mixture of what speaks to you and how that helps you orient yourself to the universe. And all religions have some sort of element to help you focus in your inner human experience and development. So to me, that's about what making room is all about. Theologically, we can make room for a vast number of people in Unitarian Universalism. I just gave you my perspective on the theology that I most feel comfortable with, but that doesn't mean I'm right. You know, in Unitarian Universalism, the minister never has the last word. So that's just one image of theologically. But the reason, I want to have a little bit of fun real quickly, the reason I asked you to come up with a fantasy character today is to think about a metaphor of if this room were our broom, and we were flying, and I guess I'm the head witch, I don't know. What are the fantasy characters that you came up with? So if you could just shout out some of them real quickly. I'm a shapeshifter. Shapeshifter means I can become whatever I need. Like if I need to get through that locked door, I turn into water, flow underneath it, and come back as a human on the other side, kind of thing. It's very handy. Anybody else?
Trixie the Good Wish and Mr. California Dreamin'.
Mr. California Dreamin'?
I know.
Definitely. And Trixie the Good Witch. All right.
Glenda.
Glenda?
Good
The Good Witch, all right.
Samantha Stevens from Bewitched.
Yeah.
Samantha Stevens from Bewitched. We've got lots of witches today. I wonder why.
I'm Alphaba, the Green Witch.
Alphaba, the Green
Eyeball.
Witch. Okay. Any more fantastical kind of creatures?
Green Goddess.
Green Goddess. Very good.
Joyful Dead.
The Joyful Dead. All right. Is that a multitude of people or just one? Anything else?
Green Man.
Green Man. So the idea, actually our theme this month was healing our bodies. And so the concept started as, think about how many bodies we can fit in this room. But it kind of expanded beyond that because it's not just body as in our physical nature, but anybody and who we are as people and how we are theologically and how we come together to be in community that I want to bring us together. So I want us to remember that all of this is part of our human experience, our religious experience, and often our mystical experience. And it's our experience. And here there is room for everyone. Amen.